بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد عبده ورسوله النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نوين التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث بالتمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والدعاء إلى الخير الدلالة على الهدى ابتغاء وجهه سبحانه وتعالى وثوابه وقربه. سبحان الله الحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد ولك الساري ومدرك الجاري واجمعنا به في كل أطارنا وعلى آله وصحبه يا نور عدد خلقه رضا نفسه وزنة عرش مداد كلماته عدد كل حرف كتب ويكتب وقرئ ويقرأ وسمع ويسمع ورؤيا ويرى أبد الآبدين ودهر داهرين. قال المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى نفعنا الله بعلومه وعلومكم في الدارين ورضي الله عنكم. Continuing with the lessons in Tawjīh Nabīh, we stopped yesterday at the point of Habib Umar mentioning about the greatness of the da'wah. The da'wah is the deen. The da'wah is the deen. And he was saying that whoever does not know the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they do not know the greatness of the da'wah. What does this mean? It means that a person's understanding of the da'wah ought to be expanding with every new day, with every new hour, with every new, Habib Umar was speaking now, with every new breath. Right? And he says that this true servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is prone and has the aptitude to be elevating and nearing himself in proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with every new breath, not just every day and not just every hour. And obviously these are people who understand the truth of the matter, of what it means to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be sincere with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that we are doing. Habib Umar, when he speaks about ikhlas and sincerity, he says a person might start this salah with takbirat al-ihram and they might be truthful, they might have sidq, but as soon as they start reciting, the sidq leaves them. He says a person might have sidq and ikhlas in his recitation, but when he goes into ruku', the sidq and ikhlas leaves him. Or he might have it in ruku', but when he goes into sujood or in i'tidal, means every new action, meaning every new breath of yours has to be conscious. Right? And there are different capacities of understanding, there are different capacities of relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We gave the small example a few days ago about how when they recite Quran, their tongues are reciting one thing, but their hearts are interacting in a different way. And the more and the closer the person gets to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their own faculties increase. Your faculties of understanding are increased and deepened. And likewise, all the other faculties, your perceptive insight is increased. And there's no limit to the abilities and the capabilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give a person. And sometimes He manifests that in the form of what they call khawariq al-adat, or what we would refer to as miracles that take place at the hands of the awliya, only just to show people what is possible. But what is truly possible, no one will actually know. And so we ended by Habib saying that the person even who is content with only the lowest of the stages will not understand the importance of the da'wah. As long as we are still gaining proximity to Allah, our understanding of the da'wah will increase. Habib Umar himself mentions the only person that truly understands what the da'wah is the Prophet ﷺ. And everyone else besides the Prophet ﷺ is deficient to some extent in the understanding of what the da'wah is. من لم يعلم أنه يمكن أن تواجهه في النفس بعظيم المنن من الله نفيس فليس عنده في فهم الدعوة حسن تأسيس. The person who does not know that it is possible for him to achieve with every breath the greatest of gifts and outpourings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he has not had a foundational understanding in what the da'wah is about. Right? Because we are looking to gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just because of the salah that you are going to perform, but in every breath in that salah. In every breath. And that is why they would talk of the breath, the rih. What is breath? Breath is rih. And your ruh, when you stop breathing, when the rih stops, then your ruh comes to an end. And the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? It's only breath. So there's a secret to the breath. In your salah, the fuqaha mentioned that if you don't recite the words to such an extent that you can hear yourself, meaning how is voice formed? Voice is formed by air that is being exhaled from the lungs. When it goes through the muscles of the trachea, then voice is actually produced. But you need that breath. And if you don't hear yourself, so a person just reading Surah Fatiha in their salah and they're doing, the fuqaha unanimous that this person's salah is not accepted. You have to be able to hear yourself. Hearing yourself, so for example, if you were in a room and there's a loud aircon, you can't hear yourself, that's fine. They say, had there been absolute silence, would you be able to hear yourself? And that's sufficient. Right? So the breath, you have to be able to hear yourself. Then the people of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention the secret of the breath, and they would say that when you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with every breath that goes out, then every breath that you take in is a gift Allah gives you. There is the wird that you read, and then there is the warid. The wird is what you offer, and the warid is then what Allah offers you. So when you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and you are conscious in your heart and mind, when you take in the new breath after that, that new breath has secrets. That new breath has outpouring, and that new breath has gifts, right? Divine effulgences from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways in which a person would be able to protect their thoughts is to be conscious of their breath, right? And even the yogis now, when they train people, right, in the Buddhists, Zen Buddhists, when they train people, they say, watch your breath. Pay attention to your breath and pay attention to your thoughts. So if you do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you are conscious, the breath that you take in now, right, as long as that breath is in you, your thoughts are protected. That is why even in the Hizbul Bahr, we come to the end of the Hizbul Bahr, the advice is to read Ayatul Kursi in one breath. Why? Is because even the people that are involved in sorcery and black magic and witchcraft, right, they can still affect people in silences between the time they are reading their adhkar and their awrad. So you might think, okay, and we find this happening, right? Students have been on adhkar and awrad and they're reading the khulasa for sometimes many months, but they're still affected with the evil eye. And the understanding or the expectation is that if I have been reading all of this adhkar and awrad, then I'll be protected. You've been reading it, but not to the presence of heart, and so therefore your breaths are not protected. And sometimes when some of these mashayikh who are dealing with curing people, sometimes they would find these talismans and these sort of things. They actually use sometimes the same adhkar and awrad of negligence. And so therefore the silences between your breaths, or the time between your breaths, require consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as the time that you are involved in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously this is a completely different science. There's a nice book, many years ago, someone gifted us a book written by one of the Shaykh of India, but it opens up a very wide horizon into beginning to understand the secrets of dhikr. The book is called Irfan, right? The first volume, mashallah, talks about dhikr. The second volume is not advised for many people to go into it, and it's available for download. وَالْمَيْدَانُ مَا أَنْفَسَهُ وَمَا أَوْسَعَهُ. And this field, or this arena, or this understanding of believing that one is able to attain in every breath proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is an extremely vast field. It's an extremely vast arena. And when something is vast, you have only then to proceed and then start to experience for yourself. وَالْحَقِيقَةُ الدَّعْوَةُ الَّتِي يَتَرَتَّبُ عَلَيْهَا الْخَيْرُ الْأَكْبَرُ لِأُمَّتِ فِي هَذَا الزَّمَانِ. The reality of da'wah, right, which ought to happen, for which the greatest good of the ummah has been promised. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ gave the glad tidings of what will happen in the end of times. the goodness of the ummah, the lifting of tribulations, the prosperity, the end of times. The end of times speaks about tribulations, and it also speaks about glad tidings. So for those things to occur, the reality of da'wah is dependent on what? من دون تحصيل طلب صادق في مشابهة تامة لصحب الأوائل أنفسهم لا تقوم. This will never be able to be achieved and established without a person sincerely seeking to resemble completely the life of the Sahaba. Right? And then this is our attachment to the Sahaba. Our attachment to the Prophet ﷺ is obviously in terms of emulating him as well. And the Prophet ﷺ himself encouraged us to follow his Sahaba, because they were the first receivers of these outpourings from the Prophet ﷺ, from his knowledge, from his states. And the Sahaba have different manifestations of the states, the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ. And then when they speak about people in the Ummah also, they would describe these people as carrying the states of different Sahaba. Sayyidina Umar anhu had a very particular way about himself. Right? In the entire, for example, Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu, there is a particular manner in the way he lived. Even in the way they ruled in their Khilafah. The historians, the scholars, when they mentioned, they would even draw rules, like what was the understanding. So for example, Sayyidina Umar anhu, he would give preference to people that were closer to the Prophet ﷺ, not based on their age, or not based on their merit, or not based on anything else except their proximity to the Prophet ﷺ and the pleasure that the Prophet ﷺ had for this person. This was the measure, the yardstick of Sayyidina Umar anhu. Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu had a different yardstick of measure. Sayyidina Uthman anhu had a different yardstick of measure. Sayyidina Ali, and likewise all the different Sahaba. And every person, as they read the lives of the Sahaba, they would find affinity in themselves with any of the Sahaba. And so it becomes an imperative for a person who wants to be involved in da'wah to study the lives of the Sahaba. And there is no himmah, there is no determination that a person will gain in wanting to do da'wah and wanting to fulfill this duty of da'wah. There is nothing greater and more determination that can be gained than by reading the lives of the Sahaba and what they expend. Not just the Sahaba, the male Sahaba, the female Sahaba as well. Sahabiyat. Sometimes the female Sahabiyat, if we read their life stories, we will say it is rare to find a man like that in today's times. Right? And our understanding of what manhood is and what womanhood is, we need to redefine that in the paradigms of who the Sahaba were and how they lived their lives. So without a person seeking sincerely to emulate and truthfully to emulate the Sahaba in all of his states, then the reality of da'wah in this age and the promises that have been given will never be achieved. إنما تقوم حقائق الدعوة التي ينتفع بها العالم, right? The realities of da'wah from which the world will benefit will only be established في هذا القرن, in this generation, على مظاهر اصطفاءة الله سبحانه وتعالى لقلوب تصدق. It will only be manifested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing what? And again, Habib Umar is mentioning this point, and we'll notice this being mentioned constantly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing what? Not choosing people. Habib Umar uses the term, he is choosing hearts. People whose hearts have been reconciled with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have hearts that are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Istifa'at liqulubin tasduq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing hearts that have become truthful, that have attained truthfulness and sincerity with Him, حَتَّى تَتَهَيَّأُ لِإِرْثِ الصَّحَابَةِ, such that it is now prepared to receive the inheritance of the Sahaba that obviously they received from the Prophet ﷺ, indicating that in the spiritual path, the reason why we want to purify our hearts, and this is also a very important concept for aspirants on the path. When a person is connected to a Shaykh, and when a person is connected especially to the Kummal al-Warithin, meaning the people who are the most perfect inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ, then your elevation and your spiritual aspirations are not in your ibadah. It is in imtithal al-amr, it is in following the instructions of your teacher. And this can be understood, right, not just in the relationship between a shaykh and a murid, but also in in any field. Okay, for example, a coach that is training a soccer team, right? One guy, he likes to dribble because he thinks he's got that skill, but the coach wants him to pass. So his success lies in what? In what he thinks is better, even though his skills might be much more fascinating than the simple pass, but the coach knows better. And likewise, in business administration, in medicine, anything, a person, no one has reached greatness without the help of a coach, without the help of a mentor, right? And so likewise, the teacher always knows best. And the mistake many aspirants think is that they think that all the adhkar and the awrad and the ibadah that the Shaykh has prescribed, that they are actually achieving something through that. So you think that by reading your adhkar, you are getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By doing all of your a'mal and your salah and everything else, you are getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously there are the faraid and the obligatory actions which are imperative, and that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But many times what the prescriptions that the Shaykh gives is only the key. We always speak about this concept of the key. The prescriptions that the Shaykh gives is only to prepare your heart, to build up the strength of your heart, to cleanse it of the impurities and to clean it. For what reason? So that then it can be poured into from the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so spiritual gifts and stations are purely the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have absolutely no part to play in it. Your part is only to prepare the vessel. And so we are deluded if we think that we are getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our ibadah. That is why Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, he would remind himself, and obviously he is to remind himself in order to teach the ummah, he needs to address his actions, because a person is prone to be deceived when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts giving them the ability to do much ibadah and recite more Quran. Then that air of arrogance starts, that I am able to do. Oh, I can stay up the whole night. I was only reading half a juz, now I can read 3 ajza a day. I was only reading 100 la ilaha illallah today, now I can read 10,000 a day. And you start thinking that it's because of your own self. And so Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani would address his actions, and he would say, Biki la nasil, that through you we do not reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through you. Wala budda minki, but it is imperative that we still have you. You need to do the a'mal and the actions and the adhkar and the awrad, but your station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what you will attain is not dependent on that what you're doing. It is purely the gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why many of the awliya, Shaykh Abdul Aziz Dabba was one of the awliyas. He received the greatest of spiritual openings. Until today there are many scholars would say that he is rare in history, the knowledge, the outpourings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him without any effort. And so many of the great awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any effort on their part. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah doesn't need you to be doing ibadah. If He wants to gift you, that is the gift. And therefore, the quest is always to get into the good books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many times even when we make dua for our children, we say, Allah, make him the best alim and make him the best hafidh and make him the best. We are throwing our children into our own spiritual diseases. Because we caught up in status, we ask for status for our children. Because we are caught up in wealth, we ask for wealth for our children. There might not be khair in that for that child, to get wealth or to be the best hafidh or to be the best alim or to be the best da'i. But ask for them to become beloved in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether that requires status or wealth or health, anything else, and ask for it in goodness and gentleness and well-being for them. And if you are in the court, if you are in the good books, if you are someone who is min ahlil mahbubiyyati indallah, if you are someone who is of those who are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then come hell or high waters, it doesn't matter. Right? You are beloved to Allah. That's the goal. And then you will not be worried about whether you have status, whether you have wealth, who's overtaken you or who's behind you. Your concern is just, I'm in the good books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the reality is you'll never know whether you are in the good books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِقُلُوبٍ تَصْدُقُ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing hearts that have attained to truthfulness with Him, so that they are now prepared to receive the inheritance. When you do the adhkar, when you do the awrad, when you do purification of your heart, when you have removed all the spiritual diseases, now you are prepared to receive. And then if Allah sees fit, He then entrusts you with that responsibility and He gives you those gifts. So they will achieve what? They will achieve the inheritance of the Sahaba, وَبِجِهَاتِهِمْ, their directedness, their complete directedness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَحَبَّاتِهِمْ, the love that they had, right, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and for themselves, for their fellow human beings. وَتَفَانِيهِمْ, they being completely annihilated from everything else and only living for this goal. وَتَضْحِيَاتِهِمْ, their sacrifices. وَذِلَّتِهِمْ, their humbleness. وَخَشْيَتِهِمْ, their fear. وَإِنَابَتِهِمْ, their turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what we call spiritual states. What does it mean to have a spiritual state? So when we read the lives of the Sahaba, right, we see that they had certain qualities. These qualities that they had, if we can take this person's qualities, for example, you take a certain person, you say all of his qualities, his character, the way he is in his truthfulness, his insincerity, in this, in that, whatever, and we sort of lift it off him as a garment, and you place it on someone else. What would happen to that person now? They become an exact replica of that. That is what spiritual states are. And so when you speak of inheritance, right, because these are gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. It is not inherent in human beings. These are gifts which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given. And what is the unique thing about the spiritual path and what makes it such a competition is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that in every generation there are these spiritual gifts, and they have been defined in the terminology of the Sufis as, the Abdal. For example, there are a certain group of people, they are known as the Abdal, they are 40, then there is another group, they are 360. These are their qualities, these are their states. The Prophet in certain ahadith, as mentioned by Imam Suyuti, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to keep on earth people, their hearts, and he describes, he says, this person's heart will be as the similarity of the heart of Adam alayhi salam. And this one will have the similarity of Ibrahim alayhi salam. These are the spiritual states. And the world cannot function, right, without these people. That is why Imam al-Haddad mentions, وَلَوْلَا هُمُ بَيْنَ الْأَنَامِ لَدُكْتِكَتْ جِبَالٌ وَرَضُونُ بِارْتِكَابِ الْخَطِيئَةِ. That were they not present amongst people, then the earth and the mountains would be destroyed because of the sins of people, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also establishes this rule in the Quran, وَلَوْلَا رِجَالٌ مُؤْمِنُونَ وَنِسَاءٌ مُؤْمِنَاتٍ لَمْ تَعْلَمُوهُم. When the Prophet ﷺ, right, was going to, just before the conquest of Mecca, there were believers or people that had accepted Islam from amongst the Sahaba, but they had kept their Iman secret. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet in the Quran that were they not present amongst the people of Makkah, we would have destroyed the people of Makkah. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses or protects people and lands because of the presence of certain people that are beloved to Him. Again, the hadith of the Prophet, right, were it not for the suckling children and for the animals and for the old people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have destroyed the world. When there is drought, it is said that the animals, even the ants, lay on their backs and they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They do not destroy us because of the sins of the human and the jinn. And so Allah has beloved, right? That is why also the word watad, there's a group of awliya, they are called the awtad. Awtad means peg. And what is the purpose of a peg? The mountains, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even describes them in the Quran as pegs. That if the mountains did not exist, what would happen to the earth when you walk? It would have moved with you. So the function of the mountains is to keep the earth firm. And likewise, there are these group, right? Imagine if any person that has not even a spiritual mentor or a spiritual guide, any teacher that's changed your life. Now you just imagine and you know what they've done for you. You think, if this person wasn't in my life, what would have happened? Where would I have been? And so if these people are not on earth, mankind will be in the negligence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many times when you come into contact with these complete inheritors, right, many times, especially in the Sada al-Ba'alawi, many times you would read about the history of these great men, right? And when you read the history of their spiritual states, of how they lived, you think that is this actually possible? Right? And we find that this is something that's inherited in every generation, right? Even on the tongues of the companions of the great awliya and the ulama of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would say, had I not met so and so, I would not have believed all that we have read about the history of the qualities of the awliya. Means when we met this particular person, we saw it completely as we have read, right? And then Habib Umar also mentions, he says, as time goes by, the spiritual stations are actually, and the spiritual states are increased and they are not decreased, because the carriers are less. So if you have 100 people to carry 200 states, each person has to carry for 2 people. But if you have 200 people carrying 100 states, each one has to carry half. And as time goes, goodness becomes more rare. And so the people who are carrying states are less, but they are carrying states of everyone that has come past. And we mentioned this before. Habib Umar also mentions, he says, when a person passes, when the great awliya pass away, they pass away on a certain state, and someone inherited that state at the end of their life. Right now, he lives his life. That same spiritual state it increases because he's continuously getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when he passes away, what he gives to his inheritors are greater than what he received. And Habib Umar also mentions always about Imam al-Haddad. He says Imam al-Haddad, he received the Qutbiyya at the age of 18 years old. At the age of 18. And he says, if that was his state at the age of 18, then what was his state at the age of 20? Then what was his state at the age of 30? Then what was his state at the age of 40? And Imam al-Haddad passed away at the age of 82. To such an extent, Imam al-Haddad said that no one will be able to carry what I was carrying, but I have distributed it amongst a host of my followers. Or Imam al-Haddad is also reported to have said that no one will be able to carry what I was carrying except Imam Mahdi, that comes at the end of times. And obviously all this, when we speak about these things, when we hear about it from the tongues of the awliya, it's not so that we can start delving into things which is not our privy, but it's only there to create a yearning that we want to emulate, and we want to throw ourselves at the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah, you choose for us what you know is best. If it's meant for you, alhamdulillah. If it's not meant for you, Ya Allah, allow us to serve those whom you have chosen for it. If you're not chosen, the best way to get into the good books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is serve those who are chosen. But don't fall into hasad, don't fall into jealousy, because then shaitans cut you out. And the awliya are such that they desire for other people more than they desire for themselves. The reason that they have it is because they desire for you more than they desire for themselves. If they had the choice, they'd say, here, take it, please, experience what we are experiencing. But it's an amana, it's a trust. It cannot be given to someone who is not worthy of the trust. And so therefore their teaching and their exhorting is just to prepare you. They're saying, come, we want you to experience what we're experiencing. That is why the Prophet ﷺ in the Isra and Mi'raj, in his closest proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the tahiyyat came to him, right, from the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. He had his ummah, right? What is the purpose of getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except to try and bring and lift your brethren up with you, your sisters up with you, so that we can all be in the same playing field. And this is the difference with the deen and the dunya. In the dunya, there is enough to go around for everyone, right? We also always say that no one complains that someone else is taking their sunshine. Have you ever seen someone walking in the street and say, hey, you're taking my sunshine, get out of, move into the shade. Allah's gifts are so vast that Allah has given everyone what their mind cannot fathom. There'll still be more than enough to go around. And so this expansiveness of understanding as well. If you want something sincerely, make dua for it, for someone else. Right? Ya Allah, give this person the grace, give him more than you even granted me. Can we make those du'as? If you give your son 100 rand and he says, Dad, give it to my brother. Say, no, I made it for you. He says, no, Dad, give it to my brother. So you give it to him. Physically, you've given the other son now, he's got 100 and this one has nothing. But who's won the heart of the, right? And so we need to deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a similar manner. Desire for people more than you desire for yourself, and Allah then He will lift you up. And you don't make dua for anyone except that the angels say, Ameen, and may it be for you to. And therefore they say, if you ever want a spiritual state or you want a certain quality, sincerely ask that quality for someone else. And sincerely ask it for someone who you have in your heart something against them. Then you truly have reached the path. That was Shaykh Habib al-Saqaf, and he was asked, when does a spiritual aspirant, and look at the answer to the question resembles a state and an understanding. The question is, when does a wayfarer or a spiritual aspirant supersede his peers? And the question is still caught up in in the arena of, I'm better, this one's before me, that one's after me. And how did the ilaj, how did the medicine come? When does a person or a spiritual aspirant supersede his peers? He supersedes his peers when he sincerely desires that his peers supersede him. Right? It's not about competition. It's all about reaching safely. Therefore, even when they do the Rabitatul Ukhuwa, and this is something that happens in rare circles sometimes with the awliya, they would, just as you have the covenant when you take bay'ah with the Shaykh, they have what is called the covenant of brotherhood. Right? And they would sit in a circle and everyone would hold hands, and they would take a covenant of brotherhood. There are certain things that is recited as well, and this is established, right, that so and so is my brother in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there are conditions for that as well. Imam Ghazali in the Bidayatul Hidayah and also in the Ihya Ulumuddin, he speaks about the conditions of brotherhood or sisterhood. Many times you think you have a brother or a sister, but we are merely acquaintances. Right? What does it actually mean? One of the lowest conditions is that they can put their hand in your pocket and you don't have any problem with what they take out of your pocket. Today's times will say you can give them your credit card and you won't even think twice about what they're going to use it for, because there is such an understanding of brotherhood that you know he won't use it for anything he's not in need. But you also know that did he need it, you wouldn't have a problem if he needed to use it as well. Right? And so one of the things that is mentioned in that Rabitatul Ukhuwa, it's a covenant that is taken, is what? That Al-Fa'izu Yawm Al-Qiyamati Ya'khudhu Biyadi Akhi. That if any one of us here is successful in the day of Qiyamah and they are saved, that they will take their brother by the hand. We don't know what our station will be. Will Allah take us to account for one small sin of which we'll have to be punished? But if there is anyone amongst us here that becomes one who is saved, then there's a covenant now that he will take you by the hand. And how great if you're doing the covenant and they are the great awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are present there. Now, وَرَهْبَانِيَتِهِمْ وَرَهْبَانِيَةِ لَيْلِهِمْ. So emulating the Sahaba in all of these qualities prepares a person to receive the spiritual inheritance which was mentioned by Umar, describing their states, their sacrifice, their annihilation in everything else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love that they had between themselves, their humility, their fear, their turning to Allah. رَهْبَانِيَةِ لَيْلِهِمْ. Rahbaniyah are the monks. Their nights were spent in the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَفُرْسَانِيَةِ نَهَارِهِمْ. And their days were spent as nights. The nights were spent as monks and the days were spent as nights. K-N-I-G-H-T-S. Fursan is the night. Nights in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? They were in jihad in the day and they stood up at night. There's a beautiful hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about, the Prophet speaks about one of the persons who are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that after a long day of travel and a long night of travel, and now it is the last third of the night, you got maybe 2 hours left and they've been traveling the whole night, and they reach a point where they want to put their bags down and people are exhausted and everyone you only want to put your bags down and just put your back on something flat so you can relax, right? And someone is extremely tired, but what do? They go and they make wudu and they stand up worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this last portion of the night. This is someone that is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but no one will be able to do that unless they themselves have a state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we speak of emulating, is when we hear about these things, even if you don't have that state, we try and emulate it. Right? You try and emulate it and you continue. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is generous. There is no desire that you have in your heart except that Allah wants to give it to you if He sees that you are worthy of it. And the awliya likewise, they are the most generous of people. And if we imagine that, and if we know that they desire for others more than they desire for themselves, then can we say that they are stingy? No. But that will make us understand that the only reason they are not giving is because we are not worthy of receiving. We have not prepared the receptacle. وَالْعَيْنُ الَّتِي نَظَرَتْ إِلَيْهِمْ ذَاكَ الزَّمَانِ هِيَ النَّاظِرَةُ فِي هَذَا الْقَرْنِ أَيْضًا. The divine eye that looked upon them, upon the Sahaba, in that time is the same divine eye that is looking upon us in this time. They say, As-Saqi Baqi. Allah, the Lord of the Sahaba, is our Lord. What He gave the Sahaba, He can give to us. But obviously, the difference, the disparity in the comparison. وَاللَّهُ مَا نَقَصَ مِن نَظَرِهَا شَيْءٍ. Having mistaken an oath, he says, by Allah, the gaze and the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have not decreased in the least. لكن النواقص عندنا. The deficiency is in ourselves. عند أهل هذا الزمان وأهل هذا القرن. Right? The deficiency is in the people of these times and in the people in this or these generations. Allah is the one that gives, and His gifts are unlimited. So when Allah does not give, it is not because problem is with Allah, the problem is with us. مع يقين أن الحق سيختار بلا مرية. And even though the deficiency is with us, but we know these promises that have been made by the Prophet ﷺ, and we have yaqeen أن الحق, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the truthful one, سيختار بلا مرية. He will most definitely choose people whom He will use for the establishment of the deen. وَسَيَبْرُزُ أَقْوَامٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will manifest such people في هذا القرن, in this generation. يَصْطَفِيهِمْ, He will choose them. وَيَجْتَبِيهِمْ, He will elect them for His own self. وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa alayhi salam, وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي. Sana'a means to manufacture something. I have manufactured you for myself. What is that? What is that station of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah says, I made you for myself. And He told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. Right? Obviously, the translation in English with the Arabic is very difficult in this verse. فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا. You are under our divine care. إِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا almost means like you are in my eye, or you are in front of my eye. Right? That's the station that the Prophet ﷺ had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, we always speak about the metaphorical meanings. وَيَصْطَفِيهِمْ وَيَجْتَبِيهِمْ وَيَرْتَضِيهِمْ. Allah will be pleased to use them and choose them. وَيُدْنِيهِمْ, He will bring them in proximity to Him. وَيُصَافِيهِمْ, He will purify them. وَيُذِيقُهُمْ حَلَاوَةُ جُودِهِ, and He will allow them to then taste experientially the sweetness of what? Look at the description of Habib Umar. Right? حَلَاوَةُ جُودِهِ. They will taste the sweetness of His existence, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence. This is another dimension, right? Because what is spiritual taste? Spiritual tasting is the interaction with the divine, right? Becoming acquainted with the divine, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only mawjood. Allah is the only existence that is intrinsic. All existence other than Him is only through Him. And so when you become acquainted with this true existence, there is a sweetness in it, because it is the source of your existence, right? And obviously these are different spiritual states. وَفَهْمَ خِطَابِهِ, the sweetness of now understanding His divine speech, right? Either through the meanings that Allah puts in the heart, or the recitation of the Quran, or when a person is involved in the ibadah and dhikr. وَصِلَاتٍ صَافِيَةٍ, and pure spiritual states with Him. Silat means connections, pure connections with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَوِيَّةً بِهِ, extremely strong spiritual connections, right? وَبِنَبِيِّهِ لَا تَكَادُ تُخَيَّلْ, and all of these connections and states and sweetnesses, right? In relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in relation to who? To the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. لَا تَكَادُ تُخَيَّلْ, which cannot even be imagined or fathomed. هَذَا الصِّنْفِ إِرَادَةٌ مِنَ الْحَقِّ تَعَالَى سَتُظْهِرُهُمْ. This group of people, they are people who are willed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning Allah has decided that He will choose these people and that He will manifest them in this time. They exist in our time, and they are going to be existing And Habib always says, Allah will bring people out of kufr in our times and He will elevate them to these stages. Meaning the Maidan is there, it's open for all of us to attain. All we have to do is approach and ask. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات